This is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, speaking to you on behalf of Brit-Am Hebrew Nations, an organization and a movement that concentrates upon finding lost in tribes amongst Western nations. We have 3 R's as our guiding principle: research, revelation, reconciliation. We research where lost in tribes are, we reveal the information to the general public, and we work towards the reconciliation of Judah, that is the Jewish people, and the lost tribes of Israel amongst Western peoples. We are now discussing, or continuing our discussing, of the tribe of Ashur. The tribe of Ashur was an important tribe amongst the Israelite tribes, and its area, or the regions over which it ruled, stretched from somewhat north of the present city region of Haifa, in the state of Israel in northwest Galilee, and stretched all the way up, all right through Lebanon into northern Syria, reaching all the way upwards to the border of Turkey and into Turkey. And we have discussed this, and then we're continuing our discussion. And Ashur, the tribe of Ashur, was both a happy tribe. The very name Ashur means happiness. That an innate quality of simcha, of happiness and rejoicing, and it was a warrior tribe. It had warrior qualities which stood it in good stead. And the tribe of Ashur is also associated with the name Jeshurun, or Jeshurun as it's transliterated in English. Jeshurun is another name for Israel in general. It's another name for Israel in general. It's found a few times in the Bible. One of the places where it's found is in Deuteronomy 33, following straight on from the blessing of Moses to the tribe of Ashur. Deuteronomy 33 to verse 25 says, "And of Ashur he said, Ashur is the most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, let him dip his foot in oil. Your sandals shall be iron and bronze, as your days so shall your strength be." And then he continues, "There is no one like the God of Jeshurun, who rides the heavens to help you, and his excellency of the clouds. The eternal God is your refuge. And underneath of the everlasting arms he will thrust out the enemy from before you and will say, destroy. Then Israel shall dwell in safety, the fountain of Jacob alone, the land of grain and new wine. His heavens shall also drop dew. Happy are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord. The shield of your help, the sword of your majesty. Your enemies shall submit to you, and you shall tread down their high places." So here we have a blessing to Ashur, to the tribe of Ashur, from Moses. And following straight after this blessing, we have a blessing to Israel in general, calling upon the God of Jeshurun, and continuing to recall the fountain of Jacob alone, and to and the expression, "Happy are you, O Israel," and how God Almighty saves the Israelite nation and helps them and guides them, and causes the enemies to submit to them. And the very placement of this expression, the God of Jeshurun, straight after the blessing of Ashur, according to principles of biblical exegesis, of biblical commentary, could already suggest a possible connection between Ashur and Jeshurun. According to the Midrashim and commentary of Sifr of Arashi, the blessings to beginning from the recollection of the God of Jeshurun onwards, are referring to all of Israel, as we said, as we already said, as we noticed, as the simple meaning of the verses also lend themselves to be understood. But nevertheless, the verses, due to their placement, may also indicate a special significance to Ashur. Fishel Ma'el, who wrote a very interesting book about the tribes of Israel in Hebrew, examining, according to Jewish rabbinical sources, the characteristics of the tribes of Israel. He, concerning the tribe of Ashur, he also found a connection between Ashur and Jeshurun, and the name Jeshurun. First of all, the name Jeshurun is apparently derived from the root Yashar, meaning upright in Hebrew. So too the name Ashur can also have this meaning, or also can lend itself in that direction to have the same meaning as Jeshurun. Also, we had the high priest in the temple service. He had a breastplate. On this breastplate there were 12 precious stones, one stone for each of the 12 tribes. And according to the understanding of the commentator Hiskuni, the names Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Shifta Jeshurun, that is the tribes of Jeshurun, the tribes of Israel, were written on this breastplate. They were written across with had the stones, the 12 stones. On each stone was written the name of the tribe. And in addition, above the name of the tribes were written Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Shifta Jeshurun, with some of the names being split into half and spread over, or even three, spread over several of the stones, so that from the beginning of the name of the stone until the end, these names were written, could be read out in addition to the names of the tribes. And according to this computation, the tribe of Ashur, the stone of Ashur, also above the name Ashur, it bore the first three letters of the name Jeshurun, Yishar. So this already shows a connection between Jeshurun and the tribe of Ashur. And not only that, but archaeologists found an inscription in Phoenician type Hebrew mentioning Tyre and Jeshurun in the city of Tyre, the Phoenicians' city of Tyre. Tyre was a major city of the Phoenicians. It was on the Lebanese coast. It was also, according to the Bible, in the area of Ashur, in the area ruled over by Ashur. And we have found in this area of Tyre an inscription mentioning Tyre and Jeshurun. Tyre and Jeshurun, that is Tyre and Israel, or the Jeshurun being Israel, and also having a special connection to the tribe of Ashur, which ruled over the area. Another city of the Phoenicians which was very important was Sidon, and this too was in the territory of Ashur according to the Bible. And so this is a linkage between Jeshurun and Ashur, and also the blessing to Ashur in Deuteronomy 33 is followed on by a blessing to Israel in general, recalling the God of Jeshurun, and we have understood this to have a special applicability to the tribe of Ashur. Above that, when we saw in Deuteronomy 33, it says, and of Ashur he said, is a blessing Ashur, blessed is most blessed of the sons, let him be favoured by his brothers, let him dip his fruit in oil. Your sandals shall be iron and bronze, as your days shall your strength be. And this expression, your sandals shall be iron and bronze, your sandals, the word translated as sandals in Hebrew is minalecha, literally your locks or your safeguards. Iron and bronze will be your safeguards. And the commentator Rashi, who usually derives his information, his opinions from Midrashim, from more ancient sources, says that Rashi says that they should be warriors. This refers to all of Israel, and that they should be warriors dwelling in their borderlands and locking up and safeguarding it with iron and bronze. And so we have this blessing, even though it was applied to all of Israel, it is part of the tribe of Ashur, part of the blessing to Ashur by Moses in Deuteronomy 33, 24 to 25. After that, in verse 26, Deuteronomy 33, 26, he goes on, recalls the God of Jeshurun, and he continues whole blessing, detailed blessing to all of Israel in general, but having applicability to Ashur in an emphasized manner, in a more particular way, as if to say. And this blessing says, the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will thrust out the enemy from before you and will say, destroy. See Deuteronomy 33, 27. And so we see that we are commanded, or Israel is exhorted in this verse to act bravely, to act as a warrior. So these things are in the hands of heaven, and each and every one of us has something of the hero within him, and also has something of the coward, because this is a basic instinct of self-preservation that we all have, that we all need. But even a hero is someone who does the work and also survives and comes through. So we need a little bit of both these aspects, and God Almighty will bless us and teach us and direct us when to apply these different aspects of our existence. So this was a blessing that was being given to Israel that if they go in the way of the God Almighty, they will know when to be warriors and when to fight and when to conquer. And it says in Deuteronomy 33, verse 29, happy are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, with the sword and the sword of your majesty. Your enemies shall submit to you, and you shall tread down their high places. And the sword of your majesty, this, according to the literal simple meaning, means that the Almighty will be the protector and champion of Israel. That's what the verse says. But in Hebrew, it can also be, not only in Hebrew, but also even in the English translation, it may also be understood as applying to Israel, to Jeshurun, and it's saying for whom the sword is of your majesty. That is the sword with the source of your pride and your rulership. We must remember when we have different verses that are applicable according to the Hebrew script, according to the Hebrew language. So this is there for a reason. This is often deliberate, or more often than not, this is deliberately there. And both aspects of the wording are applicable at one and the same time. There is no contradiction. There is a supplementation, a complementation of the different aspects of these blessings. So Israel was blessed that he should be enabled to conquer and to rule, and that through his sword he would receive the blessings and he would be able to rule over others for the good of everyone. It says, your enemies shall submit to you. In Hebrew, it says, Ashur, meaning deny. In other words, they will deny their own enmity that they feel towards you and force themselves to submit to you. You shall tread down their high places. You will force them to behave themselves. They will conduct themselves according to your will and do the better for the good, and rather than do what they want to do against you and against rationality and justice. We are here to enforce justice in the world. This is the blessing given to Abraham. This is the blessing given to Isaac and to Jacob. This is the blessing given to all the Israelite tribes. This was to be the task of the 10 tribes in their places of exile, to teach the nations justice and judgment, and to elevate them up, to pull them up from the bottom. And Ashur, the tribe of Ashur, was also destined to play his role in this, in these actions, in this obligation that tribes had. And Ashur did that through his association with Manasseh and through his association with Ephraim and with the tribes of Joseph in general, as we have shown and will show again. Concerning Ashur in the time of the Bible, we have the book of Judges, has the song of Deborah. It tells us about Deborah and Barak, how they fought against northern Canaanite kings who were oppressing Israelites. And it mentions those tribes who went out to fight against the Canaanites and those who stayed behind or did not rally to the cause. And amongst those who did not rally to the cause was Dan and Ashur. It says, why did Dan remain in ships? Ashur continued on the seashore and abode in his breaches. Judges 5:17. So at that particular point, Ashur did not come through. He did not pull himself up and did not come to the front when he was needed. But at other times he did. But it describes Ashur as remaining on the shores of the sea. Ashur was a seafaring tribe. And also says that Ashur abode in his breaches. In Hebrew, Mifratzim, and actually a Mifratz is an inlet breaking in the shore. Deborah, in her song of praise and in the exaltation of victory, she remonstrates with Dan, who remained in his ships, and with Ashur, who continued on the seashore and abode in his breaches. Judges 5:17. The word rendered breaches in Hebrew is Mifratzim. Michael Sternholm Krank, in an article entitled Sweden being the tribe of Ashur, he identifies the tribe of Ashur with Sweden. We disagree with him, but nevertheless he has some interesting points. So he points out that Vik, the Nordic languages, northern languages, Vik or Vig, Vik is is an inlet, which is the translation of Mifratzim. It says that Ashur remained on the seashores, and Ashur was a seafaring nation, and also dwelt in the inlets, in the Mifratzim. And the word for inlets in a breakage in the seashores, in Hebrew, Mifratzim is in Nordic languages is Vik, and this is where we get the word Viking from. So he suggested the linkage between the Vikings and the tribe of Ashur, and in this we agree with him, even though we find that Sweden, for instance, to have been dominated by the tribe of Gad. Gad was the full brother of Ashur. Ashur and Gad were the sons of Zilpah, and there were elements from the tribe of Gad in Sweden, but nevertheless Sweden on the whole was dominated by Gad, whereas Norway from Naphtali, which is also associated historically in the biblical times with Ashur. They were neighbours. And in general we find Ashur to have been recalled or mentioned in Scandinavian mythology as the As or the Assyr, and the As is how the Phoenicians pronounced the name of Ashur. And paradoxically, in biblical times even, the tribe of Ashur did have what are classically considered Viking qualities. The tribe of Ashur was a seafaring nation. They dwelt on the seashores, they went out to sea, they traded and they raided. And they dwelt in the inlets, whereas the same way as the Vikings dwelt in the inlets and the fjords of the north. And Ashur was involved with the Phoenicians. Ashur ruled over the Phoenician cities such as Tyre and Sidon. And the Phoenician ships are almost identical in their profiles and in their construction and design with what later became the Viking ships. They're almost one and the same. They overlap. There are many qualities of the Vikings which remind us of the Phoenicians. Both were seafaring peoples, both used a similar form of sailing vessel. And both went out to sea, and the Scandinavian Bronze Age had strong connections to the Middle East. It had connections to ancient Egypt, to Mycenaean Greece, to Cyprus, to the area of Israel and of Syria. And not only that, but with the Vikings in popular depictions, in popular comic books illustrations, the Vikings are usually depicted with horned helmets. So modern historians say that this is a recent invention of the last couple of centuries, and that historically the Vikings probably did not have such helmets at all. They did not have horned helmets. But paradoxically, the tribe of Ashur probably did, because we find from this region, the region in which Ashur dwelt, statues and statuettes of gods and of warriors with horned helmets, and also Egyptian depictions of the sea peoples, amongst whom we find the tribe of Ashur, known as the Weshesh in some Egyptian inscriptions, also have depicted with these horned helmets, which later became famous under the Vikings. And the sea peoples raided and attempted an invasion of Egypt in a similar way as the Vikings were later to do in Western Europe. So there are parallels in fact and also in imagery between the tribe of Ashur and the Vikings. Ashur was also famous, or apparently contributed towards the metallurgy. Ashur was identified with the sea peoples. The sea peoples had developed metallurgical science, proficiencies, as indicated by archaeological findings. Also, so did the Phoenicians, and the tribe of Ashur was interconnected with the Phoenicians. And we also already saw that one of the blessings to Israel in general was to be the usage of bronze and iron in making their safeguards, and this especially being appropriate or applying to the tribe of Ashur. An early English historian in the 1600s claimed that Israelites from the tribe of Ashur participated in the exploitation of tin in Cornwall and Britain. And we know that the tin trade, the tin was very important in ancient times. Tin is a rare metal, it's only found in certain areas. In ancient times the Phoenicians had a virtual monopoly on the trade in tin, and apparently they took their tin from Cornwall in Britain, as well perhaps from Brittany in France and from areas of Spain, and they brought it to the Middle East. And the Phoenicians, according to archaeological findings and also legends and traditions, had been in the region of Cornwall and had developed the mining enterprise there in the same way as they later did in Spain. And the tribe of Ashur, whilst it was in the land of Israel, it ruled over a very large area, a very expansive region, but it only settled in bits and pieces and scattered settlements all over this area. It did not drive out the native inhabitants, it did not drive out the Canaanites who dwelt there already. And the people of Ashur lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land. They lived amongst them, as we are told in Judges 1:31-32. Also, they remained on the seacoasts and in the inlets, as Deborah said in the Judges 1:31 and Judges 5:17. And also, we find that Ashur joined Gideon from the clan of Gilead in the tribe of Manasseh, who went to war against the Midianites, Amalekites, and others from the east, Judges 6:35, and he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and he also gathered behind him. He also sent messengers to Ashur, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they came up to meet him, and they went to war with him. And as we saw, the tribe of Ashur lived amongst the Canaanites, intermixed with the Canaanites, and it was part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And the 10 tribes of Israel, these 10 tribes of Israel separated from Judah in the south. They set up their own kingdom. In Ashur, we are told that Ashur intermixed with the Canaanite peoples, dwelt amongst them. And like all the other tribes, like all of the other members of the 10 tribes, Ashur apparently learned paganite ways, as we shall see also in later talks concerning the tribe of Ashur. They learned the ways of the nations around them. Because of that, they were exiled, as were all of the 10 tribes. As we are told in 2 Kings chapter 17 and 18. They were taken away by the Assyrians. They lost consciousness of their identity. Most of the Israelites who were taken away were taken overland to Habor, Halak, and the areas in the north, and also to the cities of the Medes. But in addition to that, a portion of the Israelites were also taken over the seas by Phoenicians and Philistines, working on behalf of the Assyrians. They were transported to areas in the west, to Spain. From there they moved from Spain, they moved further to the north and to the west, to Ireland and to Britain and to northern areas. And also some of them apparently were taken to these northern areas directly, because we have archaeological evidence of Assyrians having been in those regions. We also have archaeological evidence of Minoan colonies, and Minoans are to be identified with the Philistines. And also the Phoenicians, we know that the Phoenicians at that time, after the 700s BCE, they set up colonies in Spain and so on, that lasted for about 200 years, and after that these colonies were abandoned. And archaeological evidence indicates that peoples from these areas moved into Gaul, and also into Ireland and to the Isle of Britain. And these apparently included members of the tribe of Ashur, and it is actually logical that they should do so, because the tribe of Ashur had had an extensive domain in the north. It had been interactive with the Philistines, with the Phoenicians, also not only with the Philistines in the south, in the region of Gaza, Ashdod and Ashkelon and so on, in the southeast of Judah, as the Bible tells us, but new archaeological evidence also shows that there were Philistine enclaves in the north, in Syria, in the region of Aleppo, Hama and Antakya, as is evidenced by inscriptions that have been found just recently, as released in this year, last year. And Tel Tayanet is one of the areas that pertain to this enclave of Philistines in the north, and it is in the far north of Syria, and in the regions of Aleppo, Hama and Antakya. At all events, this region of Ashur was the heartland of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were employed, as we are told in the book of Amos, the Phoenicians were employed by the Assyrians in transporting Israelites. So it stands to reason that Ashur would have been amongst the guests or the victims of this Phoenician cooperation with the Assyrian conquerors. We have parallels to some degree in the way the Jews were treated in Eastern Europe. Some parts of Eastern Europe before the Holocaust, the relations with the Gentiles were bad. In other parts they were quite good. But when the Germans conquered, very often people who lived besides each other all their lives, as neighbours, as friends, as peoples belonging to the same community, turned on each other. They turned on the Jews, and they assisted the Germans in persecuting the Jews and in expediting the extermination of the Jews. So too, apparently the Phoenicians and the Philistines assisted the Assyrians, and they enabled the Assyrians to transport the Israelites to other areas to carry on as slave labour or as colonists the new Assyrian-controlled dominions in the west. And the tribe of Ashur apparently was amongst these, those who were so transported, as well as possibly as well as a portion of the tribe being taken overland with the others to Media and the similar areas. And in their places of exile, they eventually converged in different regions. We find entities from Ashur, from the tribe of Ashur. We find them in Scandinavia. We find them in the British Isles. And we identify them in different groups, and also we find, very often we find them dwelling alongside other groups from the tribes of Manasseh, from Naphtali, Gad and Dan. All of these groups had been neighbours to them in the land of Israel. In the future they will return. Ezekiel 48 tells us how the lost ten tribes will return, and they will receive, each tribe will receive its own inheritance in the land. And Ezekiel 48, chapter 48, verses 1 to 4 tells us about Dan and Ashur. It tells us, now these are the names of the tribes from the northern border along the road to Hethlon at the entrance of Hamath, to Hasa Enan, the border of Damascus northward in the direction of Hamath. There shall be one section for Dan, and so on, one section for Dan by the border of Dan, etc. One section for Ashur by the border of Ashur, and one from the east side to the west, one section for Naphtali by the border of Naphtali from east side to the west, one section for Manasseh. So these were the tribes. These tribes, Dan, Asher, Naphtali and Manasseh, that had once dwelt more or less alongside each other in biblical times, and in the end times they once again dwell in proximity to each other when they receive their tribal portions in the greater land of Israel, when the lost tribes return and reunite themselves with Judah, as described in Ezekiel chapter 37. Thank you. May God bless all of you.